My next guests are here to tell an extraordinary story. Robert Artigo is the author of a new book, Black and Pro-Life in America. It's about Baptist pastor Walter Hoye's arrest and eventual incarceration for his pro-life beliefs and outreach in the black community. I spoke to both men recently about the book, Pastor Hoye's experience in jail, and the personal events that led him to be such a strong advocate for life. Here's my exclusive interview with Pastor Walter Hoye and Robert Artigo. Robert, I want to start with you. In your introduction to the book, you say this story really is not about abortion and didn't have to be told from that perspective. What about Pastor Hoye's story drew you to tell it?
It's an American story. It's about American history. It's about the experience that he had in Oakland in the context of American history, the unfortunate events surrounding the suppression of an entire population in this country. I think that it was a great education for me, what I learned and discovered about Reconstruction. And so I think that people would get lost in the subject matter if they just stuck to the idea of abortion and didn't realize that what this is an example of a continuing problem with race in this country that deals with really the tyranny of the majority.
Now, Pastor Walter Hoye, your pro-life conviction really was solidified when your son was born at 22 weeks. He weighed about 2 pounds. How did you get involved in the pro-life movement and demonstrating in front of this abortion facility where the story really takes shape?
Really, one day I got a call in my office, which was really quite hard to catch me there. And the plan was for a pastor, a black pastor, to stand outside of an abortion clinic. And they were thinking that it would be difficult for anybody to walk by a pastor, a deacon, a priest, an elder, someone they'd recognize in the pulpit and go on into the clinic without stopping to talk. And you know what? They were absolutely right. The women stopped and we talked.
And Robert, you explained how the city of Oakland went to great lengths to pass this bubble law, and then they enforced it on the pastor. Explain to viewers what the law intended and what it delineated.
Well, back in 2000, they had a similar bubble law. This was like a stay-away kind of law that said within 100 feet of an abortion clinic, you can't be within 8 feet of a person entering or a person associated with the clinic. But a city council member at the time said, hey, we don't need that because we've got great laws on the books already in California and federal law to protect it. We don't need it. The first day Walter was out there on the sidewalk in front of this for-profit abortion clinic in Oakland, they called the city council member. They called that particular city council member and they said, hey, remember that bubble law? Let's get that thing going. And they really fast-tracked it through the city council without any real serious questions. Meanwhile, they demeaned Walter Hoye and the 2 elderly ladies that spent their time on the sidewalk there. Absolutely. They didn't seem to care at the time that there were other people out there. But it definitely bothered him that Walter Hoye was there and a black man in front of that clinic where black women were going in and having abortions. So they passed the law, went through, and as soon as it was passed, within, I can't remember the exact amount of time, but I want to say 3 or 4 months of a few times of Walter being out there, and mind you, 2 hours per week, that was it, that Walter was out there. And then each week, there was some kind of plan to try to make sure that the police were out there to cite Walter. And finally it happened, and that, of course, led to a trial, criminal trial.
And Pastor Hoye, there's an 8-foot perimeter where you can't approach anyone heading into the abortion clinic. And you had a sign, right? What was on the sign, and why were you eventually jailed?
My sign simply said, God loves you and your baby, let us help you. And that turned out to be the exact 3 questions I would get. The ladies would walk up to me and they would say, is it true that God loves me? And I say, yes. And they say, is it true that God loves me and my baby? And it was always her baby. It wasn't anything else. And I say, yes, God loves you. God loves your baby. And then she'd look at me straight in the eye and she said, well, if that's true, if it's true God loves me, if it's true God loves my baby, will you help me? and I did. There wasn't anything that she wanted that we couldn't take care of.
Now, so they cite you for what was it? Violating the bubble rule?
Absolutely. And it was simply standing on a public sidewalk, holding a sign, passing out literature, and having a conversation.
And you get a sentence of 30 days, which you took in jail instead of the lesser community service sentence. Why did you take that?
Well, let's get this straight. I was facing 4 years in jail. It boiled down to 30 days because we had videotape evidence in court that my rights were being violated. And so in order to keep from being completely embarrassed, the courtroom's packed, the media is everywhere, they see the videotape, they see just the opposite of what they expected to see. The judge says, okay, let's do 30 days.
And while you're in jail, you minister to men there, you fast, you start a prayer group. Tell me what your time in prison was like, and I know you had a special visitor at the same time.
Well, my time in jail was filled with witnessing. There were those that were up all day, and I would be counseling with them all day. And then there were those that were up all night, and so I was counseling all night. Essentially, I wasn't sleeping in jail. And yes, we had prayer at midnight like Paul and Silas, and I tell you, it was just an amazing time. We led so many of my brothers in jail to Christ.
Bishop Salvatore Cordileone, the Archbishop of San Francisco, also visited you there. What was that relationship like? Has it grown?
Oh, my goodness. He has become my dear, dear friend. It was a fantastic visit. Because of who he was at the time he was bishop-elect, they actually led he and I to a wing that wasn't being used. And so we were alone. And during that time, we had a very, very deep, very, very special conversation.
Walter, you write about abortion and the effects it has specifically on the black population in America. You say that abortion is the biggest single negative force on black American growth, deterrent to it. You give the audience a sense of these numbers. In 2015, there were an estimated 1,044,679 black American women who were pregnant. 621,000 plus of those resulted in births, 423,000 in abortion. That means 40% of those pregnancies ended in abortion. What impact has this had on the black community, and why don't we hear more from black leaders about this crisis?
Well, let me tell you, I mean, even if we add to that the abortion industry's data, where Alan Gutmacher says there's 28%, and the CDC says there's 35%. Even if we consider the fact that we're only 12, 13 at the max, 14% of the population, and then you cut that in half, just consider women, we're down to 7. And if you cut that in half, considering 15 to 44, oh my goodness, you're down to about 3. And the impact is that we are now below replacement level. The total fertility rate, replacement level is 2.1. We're now down to 1.8. And if we don't stop, if we don't think about where we're going, and we continue at the current rate that we are now in terms of abortion, by 2050, we'll be looking at 1.3 and 1.3, Raymond, is there reversibility.
Unbelievable. Do you see this as is there a racist intent and edge in the way that the black community is targeted? These abortion clinics are predominantly in the black community all over America.
There's no question about that. You can not only look at the location of the abortion clinics, but you can also see how the clinics are located in a specific area where it makes it really, really easy. And this is all throughout the country. And so I don't think there's any question that this is simply targeting.
I want to read something you wrote. You said, keeping the black American community smaller and less powerful reflects the racist, eugenic, and genocidal mindset behind the abortion policies advanced by Planned Parenthood and the Democratic Party under the guise of helping black Americans. If Black lives matter, then the life of the human being inside the womb of his or her black mother matters too. How do you get that message out, given the polarization we're seeing in the media and elsewhere?
Well, one thing we talk about is that God created life. And when I'm talking to black leadership, particularly black pastors, we can agree, biblically speaking, that God created life. And when we start talking about who's human and who's not, it becomes painfully clear, particularly to black pastors, that really understand personhood and understand that at one point we weren't considered person. So when the discussion is around who's human and who's not and who's a person or who's not, we all know where that discussion is going. And it becomes easier, it becomes clear for me to get the point across that even that child inside the womb is a living, breathing person, a human being that deserves to be protected by love and by law.
Robert, I want to get your take before we run out of time. Coming to this as an investigative journalist, what surprised you most about this story?
Well, I think that one of the attorneys who is important in the book brought it up, said it represents, Walter's story represents how abortion tends to have the ability to corrupt everything it touches. So we had a problem with the city council not asking any tough questions. From law enforcement to the DA's office to the city council and the people at the abortion clinic, everybody seemed to have a hand in approaching this with a absolutely myopic point of view. And I will say that when we talk about Walter being out there on the sidewalk with a sign that says, "God loves you and your baby," and people always say, well, it must have been something more than that. And I tell them, yes, there is, and it's much more absurd because Walter was charged with 4 counts of violating the space of clinic volunteer escorts who walked around the sidewalk following him. Here's Walter, here's the sign. They would block his sign and follow him around. And in trial, they showed videotape that the victims, who didn't even know they were victims. So I think it was very irresponsible on the part of the city council as well as the DA's office to run this operation that way. I'm also a private investigator. I've done criminal defense investigations, and I really found you asked me what was most surprising about it, and that was just how irresponsible this whole thing was.
Well, Robert, thank you so much for your time and for the book. Pastor Hoye, thank you for being here. And the book is a gripping read, Black and Pro-Life in America. Thank you both.
Thank you, Raymond.
Black and Pro-Life in America, the Incarceration and Exoneration of Walter B. Hoye by Robert Artigo. It's available now in bookstores everywhere.